Welcome to another guest spotlight of Christian Comic Art Society. My name is Louis Serrano. We're joined today by Dr. Bell. He's the writer, creator of the Dominion comic book series and now a graphic novel. Welcome, Dr. Bell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually watched another podcast you were on, Theophany Media, about your
Yeah,
projects and stuff.
that was
So
good, man. That was a good one.
yeah, so I'm a little familiar with you just from that. So
Very nice.
so tell us how. Well, first introduce your project.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm Dr. Barron Bell, and I am a professor of art and design at Liberty University and George Fox University. I've been in the comics game for over 20 years, believe it or not. First, self-publishing a book called Cobalt Warrior Angel back in the day. This is like 2001. And you may be able to find it in some long box in some comic book store in New York City or whatever. Yeah, we had a pretty good sales run with that. But then years later, I joined up with Terminus Media. We did a graphic novel called Radio Free America, which is kind of like Red Dawn meets The Wire. It's kind of like World War III from the urban perspective. And then after that, we kind of got convicted about 2 years ago because we're both Christians, me and the owner of the publishing company, Mark Stansel. And we were like, man, why are we need to, whatever we're doing, we need to do it for the Lord. Well, I don't want to do it. You know what I'm saying? I could just teach and I wouldn't care. And so he made the same kind of like a life decision at the same time that I did. So it's like a crisis of conscience. And so that's kind of where Dominion was born, actually. It's just like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we need to do it for the Lord, but we need to do it well. We need to do it at a very high level. And I'd already been kind of toying around with the idea of, kind of creating some type of Christian allegory or something inspired by the Bible, but, insert things that I loved. So I love Star Wars. I love comics, Marvel. I love, mech, big gigantic robots. I love the movie Dune, by the way, the latest one is amazing. So I wanted to and I loved kind of like the Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings and other like wonderful Christian fiction,
Fantasy,
what I'm saying, and fantasy. So kind of like I said, well, and of course I'm a amateur Bible scholar. So I'd always been kind of wrapped up in the Old Testament storytelling. And I love the founding of the nation of Israel and kingdom of Israel. I love that story. And but everyone has done David and Goliath over and over and over again ad nauseum. Everyone has done the swords and sandals type of storytelling with the Bible. And I'm like, man, wouldn't it be very cool to have like this kind of a sci-fi fantasy rollicking space opera, but related directly to the Bible. And that is where Dominion was born. It was born out of that idea where, why not? Why not? Yeah. I mean, I'd never seen it before, but why not? Why are we so afraid as Christians of like sci-fi? Of I mean, you see fantasy all over the place, but you rarely see like Christian books in sci-fi format. And so I'm like, there's no reason why I can't do it. So I just did it. Yeah. And just taking the characters from the Bible, keeping the names, but changing the situation. So instead of Israel being kind of like in this arid landscape, back in the past, I made changed the name to Dominion. So Israel equals Dominion. It's the same thing, but put it in space in this galactic context. So if you kind of transpose the map of the Middle East onto a star chart, there you go. That's Dominion. That's Dominion in the Philistines and the Egyptians and all of that, but it's different star chart, different places in the galaxy.
Nice. So what led you to, I think it's a great choice, but what made you finally land on we're doing Saul?
Because Saul is complicated, just like we are. The one thing I saw in Saul that I never saw when I'd read the story years ago was that I think maybe, maturity and age allows me to see things a little bit differently than I was when I was younger. And so when I would read the story before, I saw Saul as this maniac. You know what I'm saying? And this person who just never seemed to get it right. Yeah. And he just was selfish and all this other stuff. But upon current reading, I looked at it and I'm like, wait a minute, he looks kind of like me. I'm like, not that I'm a maniac and whatever, but we all seem to have those tendencies in us to selfishness, to narcissism, to erratic decision making, to selfish decision making. And so I decided to reread the story of Saul in First Samuel with new eyes, with just looking at him as just a person who was trying to do the best he could with what he had. Yeah. And God has a lesson in that, because, he says, man sees you on the outside, but God sees the heart. And so the first king of Israel was selected because of how he looked. Really. And it wasn't about his character. It wasn't about, was he really even qualified? He didn't even think he was qualified in the beginning because he kind of hid away somewhere. But I saw that and I'm like, there's an opportunity here to really dig deep and reach for higher critical fruit in storytelling, instead of making him this caricature of a maniac. No, he's a father. He has a family. He has a son who's craving his approval, but he tragically will never get it. But in Saul, he seeks after the approval also of his father, the Almighty, which we call the Lord in our book, the Almighty. And he just doesn't get it. He does what he thinks the Almighty wants him to do instead of what he actually wants him to do. That's why the character of Samuel is so significant, because he is representative as the voice of the Almighty on earth, and so in dominion. And so, but when Saul loses the favor of the Almighty, he is greatly grieved by that. And he wants it back so badly that he will do almost anything to get it back.
Yeah, it's a really great choice, I think. I think when I first heard about the story and the project, I thought, man, it's got such great depth of character, right? Like Saul's not one-dimensional, right? And he evolves, and he's almost, as the representative and head of Israel, behaves like them, right? He's first like, I'm good, and then he kind of like, I'm gonna do this the way the nations do it versus the way God does it, right? And I get poisoned by power, right? And I want to keep it at all costs. And it's super exciting. Just a great sandbox to play in.
I mean, it's a wonderful. I mean, I always get questions. Is there going to be anything else? When does this story end? What are you going to do next? Whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm not ending this. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Dominion is just the beginning. This Saul story is just the beginning. And if you read continually, you'll see that we bleed into later parts of the Bible. And spoiler alert, if you read the Bible, you know how the story ends. And really, that's our whole goal, is to get people to read the Bible. It's just
Yeah.
like we even place little asterisks in certain parts of the story saying you can see this in First Samuel, blah blah blah, or whatever. And then at the very end of each book, we have a study guide that will lead you directly to the biblical text, ask certain questions, help you to relate it to your life.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the main goals of Terminus and of Dominion specifically, is to guide people on a journey back to the Bible,
Yeah.
but do it in a way that's entertaining, that's exciting, and that will kind of feed that little nerd need in us.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel like when we're doing Old Testament stories in this medium, we've got, it seems like a very narrow pathway between justice to the story, but it's also very violent. But we're also not trying to make it glorify necessarily the violence. And who's
Sure,
our audience? How's
sure.
that
Well,
navigation been for you?
you kind of have to know your audience. You got to know your audience. I mean, Terminus Media is faith and family friendly. That's what we do. However, we don't, kind of underestimate our audience either. We don't
Mm.
underestimate what they can handle. Dominion is an all ages book. So it's like, if you are 8 years old or younger, you can have your parent read it with you and you can ask them questions and whatever. When it comes to visualization, we don't have violence for violence sake.
Mhm.
Everything that is, it's war, you know what I'm saying? Dominion is about war. It's also about family, but the war is important to the story. It drives the story. The impending invasion by the Philistines, it's a part of the story.
Yeah.
And you know, the daughter Michael, we've elevated her character from the biblical text to be a warrior princess. So she
Yeah.
actually is fighting too. And so, yes, you're going to see explosions and you're going to see, all sorts of lasers and all that stuff. But it is, I would say, if you're going to rate it anything, it would probably be rated PG, maybe PG 13.
Yeah.
So there isn't blood at all, any of that stuff, but it is intense at
Mhm.
times because it is war.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's always um, I think when you take a story from the biblical text and kind of change the environment but keep the story, it
Mhm.
helps kind of modern readers kind of get more of the point of the story.
No,
That,
absolutely.
like, oh, when you tell it like this, like I can connect with it more because I have more, right? I got Star Wars mind, I got
Mhm.
this mind, right? How
Yeah,
is that?
absolutely. My thing is, there are certain things I thought about when I started developing the kind of like the look and the feel
Mm.
of Dominion. I wanted people to be able to recognize a lot of things. I wanted people to be able to recognize Star Wars. I wanted the people to be able to recognize Dune or Battlestar Galactica
Mm.
or Robotech. You know what I'm saying? I want people to be like, oh yeah, that's cool because I like that type of stuff
Yeah.
too.
Hmm.
I think another very important decision that we made early on was to make our characters anthropomorphic,
You're right.
animal, human, hybrid.
Yeah.
Because this C.S. Lewis said something in regards to that very thing about animals. The reason why he used animals in Narnia was because there's something about animals that people can connect to
Mm.
on a very deep level that transcends race and gender
Yeah.
and ethnicity.
Yeah.
An animal can communicate very easily some truth to anybody. Look
Yeah.
at it in the Bible. God communicated truth through a donkey.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that hasn't changed. So we can
Yeah.
still do that. So it's like Dominion can transcend all of our biases
Right.
because the main character, they're lions. And
Right.
so we do some Christian symbology through our characters because, of course, Jesus is referred to as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So everyone in the royal lineage will be lions.
Yeah.
Our uh, priests are crows.
Mm.
Now there's no symbology in
Yeah.
Christianity about crows, but instead of using the standard kind of cliche of wisdom as an owl, I wanted to say, well, no, why does he need to be an owl? Because the thing about a crow is extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
They're very intelligent. They
Yeah.
recognize faces
Yeah.
and remember things, but there's something about a crow that's a little snarky, a
Yeah.
little bit kind of like,
Yeah.
what could you possibly do? And
Yeah.
so, I wanted Samuel to be that character,
Yeah.
whereas in the Bible, you didn't expect him to do certain things that he did, which
Yeah.
were kind of borderline brutal,
Mm.
but in the name of the Almighty, it's kind of like a righteous indignation that he would do certain things. And so I'm like, yeah, that crow, which, he's a crowd favorite. And he will be coming back at some point in time. But,
Yeah.
yes, I wanted that. And so then, of course, you have the whole kind of dominion, the animal kingdom that,
Hmm.
is kind of fun to
Yeah.
be able to create all sorts of different characters out of animals for different purposes and reasons.
Yeah. No, it's a great, as you were talking, a great tool because we as mankind ascribe things to different animals, right? The lion
Mhm.
is going to be seen as royalty no matter kind of where you live and where you're from, right? So when you have this book with the lions, you just automatically think royalty, right? And they're like, they're
Yeah.
royalty. And you're like,
Oh,
yep, got it, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, guys, Dominion Volume 1, I have to say this or Terminus
Yes,
will kill
please
me.
do.
Dominion Volume 1 is available on Indiegogo right now. You can go to our website, www.terminusmedia.com. This is a pre-order. So we do have books that we will actually have available before our drop date, which is December the 15th. So yeah, you get a nice little, kind of Christmas present out
Nice.
of it. So very, very cool. So, but okay, product
Yeah,
placement is
no,
over.
and no, definitely. I'm definitely gonna get it. We'll have to talk afterwards about
Yeah.
getting some of your stuff to CCast too. So tell me how the journey's been. I mean, you do the writing and the drawing.
I have a team.
Okay.
So I, work with my co-writer Daniel Hancock, who is an amazing screenwriter,
Mhm.
also a playwright. He actually is a director as well. So he did this wonderful audio drama called End of Darkness,
Mhm.
which is a kind of the story of the Jesus and the crucifixion, and that's also on sale on our website. But that level of storytelling that I couldn't attain myself, I had to find a co-writer. So I do kind of like the macro world
Mhm.
building, and then Daniel does the micro world building, and he does these triangulation between characters in the present and then projecting into the future of our storytelling as we hit the major plot points of the Bible. So we go through, and see, okay, well, what are we going to adhere to 100%? There are
Yeah.
certain things that you cannot not have. So,
Yeah.
Saul loses the kingdom rolls over to David, but David has to, kind of show his mettle through combat. And then, of course, whatever. And then
Yeah.
there's things that we have artistic license, like
Yeah.
developing and elevating the female characters in the story that were little more than possessions or trophies. So we wanted to breathe life into them so that we can inspire young girls and women to enjoy the Bible in a different way. And so building heroes and heroines. So my co-writer, Mr. Hancock, really is helping me do that type of thing. And then I actually pencil
Nice.
everything. And then I have my wonderful colorist, Christopher Hunt. He's amazing. And so
Mhm.
if you really love the feel of Dominion, it's because Chris Hunt has brought the color that
Yeah.
needs to be portrayed in the book. And, as a professor of art, Chris is one of my former students from Liberty. And so I saw a very teachable spirit in him. And so he was able to take my ideas and also the research that I wanted him to do, because, of course, when we do color and design of any product that we work on, we do a visual process of visual reference. We go through all sorts of design eras
Mhm.
and try to see, okay, well, Dominion is a hybrid, so we're mixing Ottoman
Yeah.
era artwork with partially Egyptian, but with high concept sci-fi, with
Mhm.
Byzantine, interior structures, and so it's like we go through that whole thing, and then of course with the color styling, I'm like, okay, well, let's lean on some of the masters for our color styling. So if we want our light to feel natural, but also very painterly, we go to Vermeer or Caravaggio with colors, or I love the Victorian era art. And so it's
Mhm.
like, okay, so we'll look at pre-Raphaelites or other things that can help us kind of narrow down the style. And
Yes.
so it's kind of a colorful palette, but it's also a little muted at times. And so we talk about color themes and color theory and all that. So it's a long thought process to bring us to the style and pinpoint it exactly the way we want it. Uh, and then, of course, we have wonderful graphic designer. So his name is Daniel Chan. He our We have a virtual office that's located all over the country. And then, of course, we have our secondary crew in Australia working on Samson. And they'll be doing other stuff in the future for Dominion as well. But yeah, it's a big family. We're all Christians. We all love the Lord. And we all are part of the same mission, which is to build something beautiful and something that can sit on the shelf next to any DC or Marvel comic book, but be about the work of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's nice. There's an element of longevity when you tap into these stories, right? Like the story's not going anywhere, and us telling it's not going anywhere. So it's kind of nice when you take a story like that, because you know there will be an audience for it always.
Yeah, and the thing is, we lean into the history. Yes, it's sci-fi, but we're building a world based on ancient text, historical text. It needs to feel old. It needs to feel like it has, a lineage
Hmm.
that it does come from. Everything in Dominion comes from somewhere, and there was a backstory, and we
Yeah.
eventually will be telling stories. By the way, newsflash, we will be having a spin-off book.
Nice.
I think Matt Baker was on last week, and so he
Yeah.
kind of hinted at that.
Yeah.
But yes, I can confirm we will be spinning off Dominion and telling the story of the judges, but in the context of Dominion.
Oh wow.
And yeah, that's called the Border Wars. And the
Oh
Border
nice.
Wars is almost kind of like how they insinuate in the first episode of Star Wars. They talk about the Clone Wars. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? It's like back in the Clone Wars. That's
Yeah.
kind of like that to us. But the Border Wars, we're telling that story as a way to inform young David, this is how you be a king. This is how you be a leader. Learn from the lessons and the mistakes of the past judges. The cool thing about Border Wars is it's going to be kind of like an anthology.
Okay.
So each judge will have their own story in a book that's told by our Dominion writing team, but a different art team. So, for instance, we are recruiting all sorts of different Christian artists who are at the top of their game. So, Sergio Cariello, who did the Action Bible, he will be a part of the crew doing Border Wars.
Awesome.
Rob Stotts, who is a former Wildstorm artist, DC Comics, he's going to be doing a story for Border Wars. And so it's like we're reaching out to several other different people, the Samson crew, Matt Baker and Daryl Pennington, who did Samson for us. They'll be doing story of the Border Wars. Of course, me and my crew will probably do one story as well, but it'll be, seven. We're not doing all the judges. We're probably doing 7 of them, or 8, and we'll put all of that. There'll be individual books released, just like we do Dominion, but then we will put it all into like a nice compendium at the end of that run.
Okay. Awesome. That's awesome. So it seems like in addition to Dominion, you have larger roles within Terminus in terms of the publishing and where you guys are going?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Terminus Media is a media company. We're starting with comics, of course, but that's a launch pad. And so, Dominion will eventually be, animated, 3D and streaming. I don't know what platform, or we're leaning on the Lord to lead us in growth.
Yeah.
And so, but we do aim to be a competitor in an alternative to the mainstream, but at the same quality of the mainstream. So as we grow, that's the direction we're headed for. And so, if you follow us on social media, we're on Facebook, at Terminus Media on Facebook, or Dominion Comic on Facebook, Dominion at Dominion Comic on Twitter, and Dominion.comic on Instagram. You will see that we are always posting work in process of what the things that we're doing. So recently we just we're putting out this kind of line of Samson statues. And so you can actually see that process going, the painting them, hand painting them and all that. Or, we're doing like 3D models of, the Dominion, crew and the Seraphim mech armor and the ships and all that. Initially, we're using that for visual reference for our artists, but eventually they will kind of transcend into other forms like toys or assets for 3D modeling for animation and all that. So we do have a huge plan, and eventually, of course, we want to expand our book line to other books and other types of books. But the thing that I've learned. And I'm not a businessman necessarily, but I've done a lot of business in the comic game and other things. Is you can't do more than you can handle. You shouldn't. You really should focus on a few things and do them really well at a high level, and then move forward as God has enabled you to do so. So we get tons of email about book ideas and story ideas and all that other stuff. And, while I love them and I definitely will keep them in the file, it would be unwise for us at this moment to spread ourselves too thin. That was Terminus 1.0. When Terminus first was out for about 10 years before I came along, and they were doing maybe like dozens of books, dozens and dozens. It's like all these different titles, but the bottom line, the bottom line did not reflect the amount of energy, time, and financing it took to put into producing those books. The bottom line didn't reflect that. So it's like after a while, I'm like, well, with Terminus 2.0, we can't do that.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable. You need to be able to show some type of profit for the amount of work you put into something.
Yeah.
And if not, you're operating in the red constantly,
Yeah.
and you can't. I mean, you will collapse under your own weight. And so, yeah, we'll do things as the Lord enables us to do them. So when animation comes, it will be because we're able to handle it financially. When other book lines come, it will be because we are able to handle it financially. Eventually, Terminus wants to do more things in the education sphere.
Mm.
And so, more Bible studies and even more just kind of historical books and whatever. So graphic novels, that's kind of like my pet thing. I want to do historical graphic novels.
Mm.
And so eventually, but now is not the time. We have to kind of stay the course, be very intentional about every single move we make, build relationships that will allow us to escalate and to
Yeah.
scale our products
Yeah.
and our business in a very kind of deliberate and intentional way.
Yeah. And are you guys mostly US based right now? In terms of
Mostly,
like where your books and stuff are going?
mostly, but we do have a fan base in Australia
Mm.
that is because of our Samson team.
Mhm.
And our books, are kind of really worldwide sellers, but most of it is in the US. We are expanding a little bit into the Spanish speaking world, specifically Brazil, because we've had interest. And
Mm.
so
Good.
we've done some translations in Spanish and Portuguese for Dominion. And so we're trying to kind of as we see the interest, and if there is the profit that's there, and where the interest is, that's where we go. And also the ability to build ministry and partner with other ministries in other countries to be able to possibly give books away to people as a part of a evangelical ministry. I think that's also what we would like to do too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can get the sense of that with Dominion and the other ones that um there's so much more than just kind of this first level of faith behind the book. It's not just like, oh, I made a Bible story, like that you
Yeah.
guys are really like ministry, study guide.
Mhm.
This is not just for the purpose of like, here's a cool story.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it if that
Yeah.
were the case. I told my wife, I mean, if like if I can't, somehow, make a ministry out of something, I would rather just teach, because
Yeah.
it's like, I'm putting time into something. I need to be putting time into the kingdom. And so being able to know that, one day I would be able to have my book in the hands of a kid in South Africa or in Saudi Arabia or wherever the spirit takes it, is going to be what we hope to
Yeah.
happen. And even with Samson, Samson is a great story, but it's also a story about someone imprisoned for a short period of time. And the way Matt and Daryl wrote the book is something that I think could really appeal to prison ministry. And so it's like, so we're going to be hopefully building those relationships too, so that we can, help the brothers who are on lockdown,
Yeah.
who, may be, experiencing some sort of depression or whatever, and they need a lift. If our book can help lift a brother to Jesus while they're in prison, God bless it.
Yeah.
So it's like, whatever we can do, that's the mission.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Christian Comic Art Society, we look to serve kind of two groups who are the same and also not the same, right? So
Mhm.
we've got our fans and we've got our creators who are usually fans as well, right? But not all the fans are creators.
Right.
And so we, love being able to not only share with people and say, hey, these are some great books now in our small little niche of
Mhm.
faith-based comics, um, but as well as for creators who say, hey, I want to do that, right? Like, and curious, like, because we are a small niche, right?
Mhm.
Are there other books that you've seen out there that you're like, oh, I like this person? Like when reading yours, I don't know if you've seen uh, the Paul the Apostle and
Oh
Peter
yeah,
who've been doing it. Are there other ones? Because that's
yeah,
similar in the sci-fi and
yeah,
but
absolutely. There are a lot of different stories out there done by other Christians that we definitely, want to kind of patronize and to help and to share and then just enjoy their storytelling.
Mhm.
Um, you know, one of the guys, his name, oh man, who was he? I can't remember, but there's this one dude. He's doing this really good comic series. And what did you know? The time I needed, it's not in my head at the moment. But but I actually reached out to him directly and went, man, listen, let's
Yeah.
talk about doing something. So but yeah, they are out there. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not coming to my head. But yes, they are definitely out there. And but the thing I want to show the world at large is that there is this stigma about Christian entertainment, Christian comics, Christian books, Christian movies, that it's almost kind of like it's amateur, or
Mhm.
it's low budget, or the drawings are not, the perspective is off, or
Yeah.
the figure drawing, what I'm saying.
It's
So
subpar.
yeah, it's subpar. That's not the case.
Yeah.
It's not the case. There's a lot of great stuff out there.
Yeah.
And our goal is to prove the point that you can do faith-based production
Yeah.
with a high level of production value
Yeah.
and a high level of quality.
Yeah.
And so, listen, man, this isn't my first rodeo, man. Listen, I initially, when I graduated from Regent University Christian School, wonderful Christian school in Virginia Beach, I graduated in 1998. Okay. Shortly thereafter, I went to LA. I lived there for about a year, and I was hustling, and I was trying to sell an animated TV series. Okay, so I had an agent, had all of it. So I was doing it, doing it, doing it. And the funny thing is, I didn't get any attention for the show that I was trying to hustle, but I got more attention with Cobalt, the comic that I had, and it wasn't even released yet.
Hmm.
But my agent had other friends in the industry or whatever, and she would kind of like put bugs in people's ear, and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And so because of that, I was able to kind of get a sit down with some reps from Warner,
Mm.
and they're like, "Yo, we are interested in Cobalt and whatever." Now, needless to say, it didn't go anywhere because, of course, you never really know what a meeting is going to produce.
Yeah.
However, it did show me that, okay, I'm onto something.
Yeah.
I'm onto something because Cobalt Warrior Angel was unashamedly Christian,
Mm.
unashamedly. But the art is what sold it
Mm.
and what made people say, okay, I want to take a look. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I, somehow Liberty, saw something in what I do to actually ask me to create a class for the master's level. So it's a arts class specifically for comic book publication
Nice.
and visual narrative.
That's
And
awesome.
so I wrote the class, and it's a master's level, and a lot of the students who go through the class will eventually either work in the comic book industry or work somewhere in film or television, using the adjacent skills of visual narrative, maybe in storyboard creation or whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like I tell all my students, it's like, listen, okay, we're not doing this just for playtime. Okay, you're paying enough money to be here. It's not playtime. What
Yeah.
we need to do is we are trying to create agents who can go into the world, infiltrate whatever media company you can and start to change from the inside out. That's the goal. And so, but the only way to do that is you need to compete at that level.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, we go through all of the storytelling conventions from, the Bible times all the way up to now, storytelling conventions through Shakespeare, talk about 3-act structures and Freytag's pyramid, all of that, doing solid character development, character creation through character profiles before you even put one pencil on the page. You go through the boot camp of storytelling first, character.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, then you can, figure out, okay, well, how do I incorporate my Christian worldview into this story? But I think for the longest time, Christian creatives have put the cart before the horse. And that's why the stigma is what it is. Yeah. It's like, okay, no, man, yes, of course, we have a message that we want to communicate. Of course you do. But you can't have that at the cost of storytelling. And you can't have that at the cost of character development. And you can't have that at the cost of good art.
Yeah. We're in a visual medium, and it's so important in this medium of comics.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's not to say that like simple art can't tell a great story, like it doesn't have to be the most detailed. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of our mission is like, check out these awesome books that people are making, and it's so connecting with like, hey, we've got these other creators. There's not that many of us out there doing this. And we are like having a lot of the same experiences, right? We've got a lot of the same goals. We're trying to make great art, great stories, to put these seeds out there, for people to be touched by, impacted, inspired by. So, how long has Dominion been from start to now? Like how long?
Well, we've been out since 2020. So
but it's even starting creating.
Yeah, well, to tell you the truth, if you really want to know, Dominion started in, when I was at Regent University.
Okay.
I was doing a story, and my friends and roommates from back in the day, they will recognize a lot of what they see in Dominion now. They saw back in the day. I was doing a story called Sword of the Spirit. And it was the same. It was pretty much the same as Dominion. Of course, there were anthropomorphic characters, and it was loosely biblically based, and it was more, kind of like a Disney sci-fi type extravaganza. So it was kind of like that back in the day. So it was more of a movie concept than a comic book.
Yeah.
But then the real impetus of it came, right before the pandemic hit. And, that's when we were putting out the Dominion Chapter 1. And it kind of was, I wasn't sure, to tell you the truth, how it would be received on many different levels. Well, first and foremost, in pitching it to Terminus, because my last book was very, very kind of hard, realistic, slash speculative fiction, more of a, kind of geopolitical statement on, enjoying the freedoms that we enjoy, or we will lose them. But doing that from kind of like a Black perspective in urban Philadelphia.
Nice.
And with Russians attacking in tanks, and then so it's like, that was the last story that I did with Terminus back in 2009. And so when I pitched the story of Dominion to Mark, I wasn't sure how it would be received, because it did sound a little weird. And of course, as Christians, we kind of have an idea of what our Bible stories look like.
Yeah.
And so, but Mark is a true geek, just like me. You know what I'm saying? We grew up with Thundercats. We grew up with Voltron. we grew up with Robotech and Gundam and all that stuff. And so I think he was kind of jazzed about the idea to do something like that. And so then, yeah, from there, it was like, taking all of our experiences and our talent and then putting it into a solid, cohesive story. And, Mark is kind of like a Bible scholar, and he was a youth pastor and all that. So he kind of was able to coalesce it and bring things together from our storytelling into a much more of a educational context with the
Oh,
study
nice.
guides at the end.
Oh,
And
great.
so that really is something that when we talk to people, we talk to the fans, but I'm also pitching to pastors and youth pastors. And if you are a youth pastor and you want some good, solid Bible study material, get them in, because
Yeah.
we have good stuff for discussion.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's an all ages book, so
Yeah.
you can take it from the youth, middle school or elementary school, all the way
Mm,
up to college, and
yeah.
talking on in those levels.
Yeah. I found the experience that like when trying to like put it out there and let people know, it's almost like when you're like to kids, like, hey, put down that candy bar and try this pear
Mhm.
or this orange. Like, it's delicious. You'll love it, right? And it's really good for you.
Mhm.
And there's a reluctance almost, but then
Mhm.
they're like if you get some in a youth group, they're gonna be like, yep, yep, yep. Like they just eat it up,
Mhm.
And it's almost like that initial like try it, like your kids will like this,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why we leaned into the sci-fi
Yeah.
and the fantasy. And I mean, when we came up with the cover for the trade, we had a whole lot of different ideas of what to
Mm,
put on the cover. And of course, on the back cover, you can see a lot of the sci-fi elements, the
yeah,
ships, the mechs, and all that. So that's there. But we wanted to make a statement
yeah.
of what this book is. You could actually look at this character and think, oh, that could be kind of like Aslan
Mm,
from Narnia. You know what I'm saying, or whatever, but
fantastic.
it's something that can be like, okay, boom, this is what it is. This is what it's about. You can kind of see in the eyes of Saul that he's not he's not all there.
Yeah.
So it's like, so it's just very, but but it needs to be able to sit on a shelf and for someone to actually want to pick it up.
Yeah,
And it can't be too busy. It can't be too, you can't think too hard.
yeah,
This is a part of marketing. Part of marketing is you really only have a few seconds
yeah.
when someone is in the store to grab their attention.
Hmm.
And that's the goal. Okay, get their attention, let them kind of cock their head and be like, what is that?
Yeah,
And then you got them.
right.
Because once they open the book,
Pick
they'll
it
be
up and
like,
flip it
okay,
through. I just need you to pick
mhm,
me up and flip through it. And yeah,
exactly,
right. Yeah.
totally, 100%.
So, one more question before I want to find out about the Terminus event.
Mhm.
What has stood out, like when you're diving into a story like this in the biblical text, you just spend so much time in it, right? Like you're like, I can tell you the Saul story, right? Like I've been spending hours in there,
Mhm.
but it like the depth comes as you spend that much time. It's like you're digging and you're like, oh man, and I didn't notice this about this, and oh, I can see how this plays out, right? If I humanize him,
Mhm.
right, in the different people, how would they actually respond?
Mhm.
How's that experience been?
It's been awesome, man. I've listen, my relationship with the Lord has mushroomed as a
Mm,
result of Dominion because I'm spending so much time in the Word.
yeah,
And man, the Bible says the Word will not return void once it's put out there. It's not coming back empty. I mean,
yeah,
you're gonna get full. And it really has been like, I'm a Bible nerd.
mm,
So it's like, I'm the one that will actually open up some, encyclopedia to, kind of figure out, okay, well, who actually was that person and who was adjacent to him? And are there other secondary sources of
mm,
material from that era that I can look at that's not the Bible? Maybe it's apocryphal, maybe it's
yeah,
something else, so I can actually learn what the world looked like. That is a rabbit hole that
Yeah.
I can go down for days and days and days and never emerge only to eat some dinner or whatever. But that part has been so fun for me because I'm able to not only take that, but I can also translate it to Dominion and
Mhm.
make it spacey, kind of
Yeah.
like Dune, just like the way the Dune movie does. It does kind of it feels ancient, but at the same time, it feels futuristic. That's how I
Right.
want Dominion to feel. And even with the research, even with creating the characters of the female characters, the Queen Ahenoam and Princess Michael, I tried to find parallels in history to build their characters. Like
Mm.
for instance, Ahenoam, she is easily Nefertiti,
Yeah.
easily,
Yeah.
because Nefertiti was queen, but behind the scenes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten, was nuts. He was crazy. But he was one Pharaoh who worshiped one God,
Mm.
the Aten. Okay. And I'm like, finding parallels. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. I'm seeing the parallels. And so while he was deteriorating and declining in cognitive ability, Nefertiti had the pharaoh signet ring to say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this to make sure that Egypt doesn't crumble
Mhm.
because our enemies are at the border trying to get in. I'm like, okay, that's dominion right there. That's
Yeah.
straight
Yeah.
up dominion.
I see.
And then with Michael, with Michael, I just said, you know what, man, I went through every single biblical reference for Princess Michael.
Mhm.
And you can see some things, you can see some story. Yes, she fell in love with David, but at a certain point in time, she kind of held him in a little bit of contempt in the future and things happened. But she started out as a trophy, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because he
Right.
defeated Goliath, she was given to David, and where was the love there? It was our job to develop a burgeoning love
Right.
story between the two characters, and some things you with biblical narrative or with narrative in general, you have to determine what to take and what to leave. And us, we determined that if it wasn't a part of the plot points that we had to meet in the biblical text where we can actually reference specifically, we could actually lose it and then
I
try to
see.
figure something else out.
I see.
So that's the thing that we're doing with that. But with her, we wanted to build a solid, good female character that's strong, kind of like Wonder Woman, but she also is feminine at the same time, and something that little girls can look up to and say, I can see myself in her.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Great. So tell us, Terminus is having an event this month. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. November the 21st, Terminus has its first live event, and it's called Christian in Comics and Animation, Tales from the Inside. And we basically wanted to kind of get together with a crew of good brothers in Christ who actually have had experience working, at high levels, in Disney and DC and Marvel and all that, and just sit down and just have a conversation, and just basically communicate, how do you bring light into the entertainment industry. It's not about, of course, everyone has negative experiences, but we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
It's not about the negative. It's like, how have you successfully navigated the world from the first time you got the call to come on board to when you either left or whatever happened at the end of it, and then how have you parlayed that into what you're doing now?
Mm.
And that's really what it's about. So, we got great guys, man. Barry Cook, who was the director of the 1991 Mulan movie. He also is doing work with the Jesus Film Project, doing animation and all that other stuff. We got Mitch Breitweiser, who was a former Marvel artist. He did a lot of Captain America comics, and then he eventually went to develop his own publishing company called Allegiance Arts Comics, and they're doing some fantastic golden age feeling,
Mm.
family friendly, all ages comics, which is awesome. They have a really good story. By the way, one of the things that got me onto Allegiance was their story of Black Bass Reeves, who was a former slave turned into a lawman
Mm.
back in back in the day. And so that stuff was awesome. And they have other good titles. We got Sergio Cariello, which
Mhm.
everyone knows who's ever been into a Christian bookstore. Did the Action Bible, did a lot of artwork, continually do artwork for the Action Bible, but he's also a former DC cat.
Yeah,
So a lot of people don't know that that's where he got his start
yeah.
doing a lot of DC comics. Then you got Matt Baker, Daryl Pennington, who y'all know from
Mhm.
last week. Did a lot of work with Disney, but also did the fantastic Samson comic book for Terminus Media, and they're doing other good stuff too. And then of course you got me and Daniel,
Yeah.
who did Dominion. So it's gonna be really fun. But the thing we want to do is just make this information attainable to people who are either fans or who are artists who are trying to get into the game,
Mhm.
and really just like putting down the mandate for how do you do this effectively. And that's really the goal behind it. But it's one of many different events that we're going to be having, and we're inviting you guys to actually be on one of our live events, so we can all just kind of sit and chit chat about
Yeah.
the comics game, especially from the Christian worldview.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're coming up on our time. We're gonna put all the links to all your guys' stuff, that event, the terminus, all the stuff in the post. Will you just also tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, man. I mean, basically, just go to www.terminusmedia.com. And actually, if you go to terminusmedia.com/events, you
Mm.
can register for the live event. And doing that actually is kind of cool because you get automatically registered into the giveaways. Now,
Nice.
let me just tell you about this, man. Listen, giveaways is amazing because it's like Barry Cook signed
Wow.
Mulan DVD, Arthur Christmas DVD signed by the creator of, it's like amazing. Mitch Breitweiser, he's given away some Red Rooster, signed Red Rooster books, and some Bass Reeves, I think Bass Reeves, maybe not, but and some just like a collector's set with bookmarks and stuff like that. And of course, the Minion books. And so we signed everything, and you'll have access. Oh, Sergio, an Action Bible signed, and some original artwork.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
it's awesome. And then
Yeah.
so
Register.
it's yeah, so register, man,
Yeah.
and it just we want to build representation for our people.
Yeah.
And when I say our people, I mean believers and seekers
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah. Excellent.
Believers, seekers, and fans. I don't care who you are, where you are, whatever. One of my students at Liberty, believe it or not, he's a Buddhist.
Mm.
And believe it or not, we do have students who are not Christian who go to Liberty, but we're able to connect on a fan level.
Mhm.
And that's where the relationship starts. That's where the seeds are planted. And that's how
Yeah.
Jesus can be glorified.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, Dr. Bell, thank you for your time. It's flown by. Really enjoyed having you. And
This is so quick, man. It's like,
I
really?
know.
It's
we hope to hear from you
yeah,
guys a lot more and we're seeing a
yeah,
lot more of your books. So
absolutely.
thank you, everyone. And see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.